I received 5 terrifying, but true stories. Different schools. Different students. Same chilling thread, danger hiding in plain sight. A new kid who threatened suicide after rejection. A coach who crossed every line. A senior whose stare never faded. A classmate obsessed with death. And a boy with a bag of hair who claimed he owned souls. These aren't just stories of fear. They're reminders that sometimes the scariest people are the ones sitting right next to you. I will read them to you. The new kid who wouldn't take no. Middle school is supposed to be awkward, not terrifying. When I was in 6th grade at a private prep school in New York City, I thought I was safe. I had been there since kindergarten, I knew almost everyone, and life felt predictable. That is, until Ethan transferred in. At first, he seemed shy but polite. He sat next to me in every class, joined my lunch table, and eventually asked for my number. I didn't think twice. I figured he just wanted to make friends. Our text started off innocent, talking about homework and random current events. Nothing alarming. But then came the night he asked me out. I told him no, as gently as I could. I wasn't rude. I wasn't laughing at him. I just wasn't interested. There was a long silence, then he hung up. Moments later, my phone buzzed. "If you don't go out with me, I'll kill myself. And it'll be your fault." My heart stopped. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. The next day at school, Ethan acted like I didn't exist. I tried to talk to him, to explain, but he walked right past me without a glance. By lunchtime, though, I overheard him whispering to kids in our grade. He told them I was a slut, that I led him on, that I used him. And then, almost in the same breath, he said, "But I still love her. She'll realize it one day." The way he said it made my skin crawl. By the end of the day, his glare was glued to me. On the bus ride home, I caught him standing outside on the sidewalk, just staring up at my window. His face was twisted, half hurt, half furious, like he wanted me to feel guilty. The following morning, I was called to the headmaster's office. Confused, I sat down while he slid a paper across the desk. "We have evidence that you've been cyberbullying 2 of your classmates." My stomach dropped. The paper showed screenshots of messages, supposedly from me, calling them names and telling them to kill themselves. It wasn't me. I had never written anything like that. "These are fake," I stammered. "They're photoshopped." The headmaster folded his hands. "You have 24 hours to prove it, or you'll be suspended for 2 weeks. I snapped a photo of the paper and stormed out. At lunch, I grabbed the 2 boys Ethan had framed, Alex and Jordan, and showed them the printouts. Their eyes widened in horror. "Why would anyone say you did this?" one of them asked. "Because I said no to him," I whispered. "That's all it took." Together, we went back to the office and showed our actual text history, normal conversations, no bullying. The headmaster finally believed me and apologized. Later that night, I got an email saying Ethan was suspended for a week. Relief washed over me. I thought it was finished. But it wasn't. That Saturday evening, I was walking home from ballet class when I heard someone call my name. My blood ran cold. Under a flickering streetlight stood Ethan. He stepped closer, his voice sharp. "So you're just not going to go out with me, huh? After everything I've done for you? After I told you I'd rather die than lose you?" I froze. "How did you even find me? You don't even know where I live." He cut me off, his face twisted with rage. "You think you can humiliate me? Call me crazy? Spread lies about me? You're the reason I want to end it. You're the reason I can't sleep. And if I can't have you, no one will." He took another step forward, fists clenched like he was about to hit me. I stumbled back, heart racing. My throat was dry, but I forced myself to scream. "Help! Somebody, help me!" Ethan's eyes widened. For a moment I thought he would attack me right there. But then he saw my building's doorman rushing out. Ethan spun on his heel and bolted into the night. I collapsed inside the lobby, shaking. The doorman asked if I wanted to call the police. I said no. I just wanted to go home. That Monday, the headmaster called me back into his office. My palms were sweating. I was terrified Ethan had spread another lie. Instead, the headmaster looked me in the eye and said, "Ethan has been expelled. He won't be returning." Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. Because even though he was gone, I couldn't forget the look on his face, the way his eyes burned with hatred and devotion all at once. It wasn't love. It wasn't heartbreak. It was obsession. And obsession doesn't always end just because someone gets expelled. The coach who wouldn't let go. I grew up in a small town where everybody knows everybody, and the high school feels like a fishbowl. By senior year, I thought I had my place: marching band in the fall, dance team for basketball season, the usual cafeteria table where jokes were louder than the food was good. I was 17, counting down the months to leave for college and finally breathe. That's when Adrian drifted back into our orbit. He had graduated years before me, one of those alumni who never really left. People called him Coach because he volunteered with the dance team. He was charming in a fast-talking, always smiling way, the type everyone greeted in the hallway like a minor celebrity. Teachers joked with him. The principal let him cut through the office. He belonged, even though he didn't. At practice he noticed me. "Clean lines," he'd say, tapping my shoulder. "You've got an eye for performance." When practice ran late, he'd offer me a ride. The first time, I hesitated. He tilted his head, all friendly concern. "It's dark. I'd rather know you got home safe." The car smelled like spearmint and cologne. The radio was always a little too loud. He told college stories, played me his favorite tracks, asked about my plans. The conversation made me feel seen. Then he'd slide in a comment that felt like a smudge on glass. "Gotta start charging for this taxi." He'd laugh. "Only accept cute passengers." I told myself it was a joke. I told myself I was overreacting. That's how it starts. Little tests of the boundary to see if it will bend. The rides turned into quick stops for sodas. Quick stops became lingering hangouts in empty parking lots. He'd angle the rearview mirror toward me as if checking traffic behind us, but the only thing to check was my face. When I started to pull away, texting excuses, walking home instead, he pivoted. He didn't get angry. He got present. One afternoon in world history, a face slid across the classroom window. The room erupted in laughter when my teacher unlatched it, and Adrian climbed in, grinning like a prankster who knew he'd be forgiven. "Just looking for another way in," he said, brushing off the chalk dust. He called my name loud enough for the whole class. I laughed along with everyone else, cheeks flushing, stomach sinking. That night, tapping at my bedroom window woke me. Soft at first, then insistent. I told myself it was a branch. It wasn't. When I finally opened the blinds, Adrian stood on the lawn, lit by the bluish glow of his phone. "Door," he mouthed. I cracked it open, whispering that my family was asleep. He slipped inside like he had a key. "You're not sleeping alone tonight," he said, as if it were a kindness. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. He stretched out on the floor and stayed, a dare wrapped as protection. "Go to sleep. I've got you." In the morning, a post appeared on his socials, a grainy shot of my room taken from floor level, just enough to recognize the blanket and the edge of my pillow. Caption: "Peaceful kid. I keep watch." My phone buzzed all day with jokes and whispers I couldn't clean off. After that, he was everywhere. Outside the gym. In the lot after school. Rolling past my block and braking just a little too long. I tried to make it small. Maybe he's just nearby, maybe it's a coincidence, until coincidence started humming my name. The breaking point arrived at a house party. My friend swore he wouldn't be there. He was there. I saw him before he saw me, laughing with a group like he belonged more than anyone. When our eyes met, he smiled the way you smile at a child who says something cute. I turned toward the street to call for a ride. He intercepted me. Still ignoring me? I'm going home. Come on, he said, edging closer. We're fine. Everyone knows we're fine. Hands appeared on my shoulders, not gentle. Liquid fizzed across my shirt, cold and sticky. Laughter flared like a match. I tasted drink I didn't want, felt the humiliating smack of attention I had never asked for. His voice was at my ear, low and private even with the crowd around us. Say you miss me. I couldn't make a sound. Someone finally pulled him back. Someone finally drove me home. The next morning I showered twice and still felt the party on my skin. I told my mom part of it, the rides, the window, the posts. She wanted to call the school. I begged her not to. Graduation was weeks away. Rumors traveled faster than help. She called anyway. The school listened the way a pond listens to a rock. It rippled, then smoothed over. They liked Adrian. He helped. He was fun. He made the team better. Surely this was a misunderstanding. So I did what kids do when the adults don't understand urgency. I went silent and planned my escape. I stopped staying late. I blocked him. I altered every route home. The space between us creaked open, barely. Some nights my phone still flashed his name from numbers he must have borrowed. Seen you. Miss you. We're fine. The last time I saw him was through the bus window on a wet April morning. He was standing under the eaves of the school, hands in pockets, rain beating on his jacket like it was afraid to touch him. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He only watched the bus pull away, and for a moment I thought, this is what it must feel like to step out of a trap and not hear it snap shut. I left for college that summer and learned what quiet felt like. I learned that safety isn't just the absence of danger, it's the right to move through a day without narrating excuses for someone else's behavior. I kept wishing I had reported more, louder, sooner. I kept wishing the people who laughed when he climbed through that window had asked why he needed a window in the first place. Here's what I know now: grooming doesn't always look like a movie villain. Sometimes it looks like a favorite alumnus with a million inside jokes, an extra set of car keys, and a talent for making adults feel flattered and kids feel chosen. It starts with favors and ends with control. It starts with, "I'll keep you safe," and becomes, "I decide when you're safe." If any of this sounds familiar, if the compliments make you small, if the ride comes with a debt, if the presence feels like a shadow that keeps lengthening, tell someone who will act. Tell a second person if the first one doesn't listen. Keep telling until the room stops laughing and starts closing the door. Because the scariest thing about Adrian wasn't that he showed up at my window. It was how long it took me to believe I had the right to shut it. The stare that never went away. High school hallways are always a blur, lockers slamming shut, sneakers squeaking against the linoleum, teachers shouting for kids to slow down. With so much noise, you'd think one pair of eyes wouldn't matter. But I felt his stare the very first week of freshman year, and it froze me in place. His name was Caleb. A senior, older and taller, with that brooding presence that stood out even when he said nothing. We'd never spoken until one day he passed me a worksheet in class. His hand brushed mine, just for a second, but it wasn't the touch that shook me. It was the way he looked at me. Not curious, not friendly. His gaze was sharp, deliberate, as if he were memorizing me. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was just awkward, maybe shy. But then it kept happening. Every single day, I'd glance up, and there he was. Staring. Unblinking. His lips curled in the faintest smirk, like he knew something I didn't. It wasn't just in class. In gym, I'd see him lounging against the bleachers, leaning back with his arms crossed, biting his lip while his eyes locked onto me. My friends noticed too. One whispered, "Why is that guy looking at you like your dinner?" They giggled nervously. I didn't laugh. My stomach twisted into knots every time. Finally, one afternoon I snapped. I spun around and demanded, "What's your problem?" He didn't answer. He just stared, expression calm, eyes cold. Then, almost casually, he whispered, "Hey." Just one word, drawn out like a joke, but his tone was mocking, like a cat batting a mouse around. I felt small, trapped, toyed with. After that, I avoided him at all costs. Sometimes that meant skipping class, faking sick, or hiding in the library. But it didn't matter. No matter where I went, he found a way to be nearby. Walking a few paces behind me in the hallway. Standing at the far end of the cafeteria, eyes fixed on me. Always silent. Always watching. There's one memory that still makes my heart pound whenever I think about it. I had been absent for nearly 2 weeks, trying to avoid him. When I finally took a different route to class, I saw him with a group of friends. I kept my head down and quickened my pace, hoping to slip by unnoticed. But something made me glance back. That's when I saw it. His fist clenched so tightly around a plastic bottle that it crumpled and cracked. His jaw was locked, his eyes burning with a hatred so raw it felt physical. Like he wanted to hurt me. That image burned itself into my memory. Eventually, graduation came. Caleb walked the stage, shook hands, and disappeared from the school. I told myself it was over. That he'd move on, that I'd never see him again. For a while, I believed it. But I was wrong. Fast forward a few years. It was October of 2024, a hot afternoon, and I was walking through the park when I heard the slam of a car door. I turned, and my breath caught. It was him. Caleb. Older, maybe rougher, but unmistakable. He leaned against a beat-up sedan, cigarette dangling from his fingers, and stared at me exactly the way he had back in high school. For a moment, time folded in on itself. I was 15 again, pinned under his gaze. My brain screamed, "Keep walking. Don't give him the chance." I hurried to the bus stop, heart hammering in my chest. Maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe he didn't even remember me. I almost believed that. Almost. Later that night, I left my best friend's house and spotted the same car parked across the street. My chest tightened. As I passed, the window rolled down. Caleb leaned out, smirking, eyes glinting in the dark. "Hey, beautiful," he said softly. Then he sped away, taillights bleeding red into the night. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. But soon after, it escalated. Some nights, when I glanced out my window, I saw them, 2 figures across the street, standing on the stairwell, holding binoculars. Watching me. The first time, anger overtook fear. I flung my window open and shouted, "Leave me the hell alone!" They froze, then slipped into the shadows. For a while it worked. Weeks passed without a sighting. I let myself relax. Until 2 days ago. I was making tea in the kitchen when I felt it, that prickling on the back of my neck. That instinct you can't explain, but you can't ignore. Slowly, I peeked through the blinds. And there he was. Caleb. Standing across the street, perfectly still, his face half hidden by shadow. But I didn't need to see his eyes to know. I could feel the stare. The curtain slipped from my hand. The mug of tea rattled against the counter as my fingers shook. My pulse pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. I don't know what he wants. I don't know why, after all these years, he's still here. But what I do know is that his stare never left, it only waited. And sometimes, the scariest thing isn't when someone finally speaks. It's when they don't have to. The joke he wouldn't stop telling. At our lunch table, we were the safe corner. Emo kids, theater kids, queer kids with thrift store jackets and chipped black nail polish. We traded playlists and inside jokes and pretended the cafeteria lights were stage lights. That's where Mason found us. Skinny, pale, bangs in his eyes. At first he hovered, then he sat, and because we were the kind of group that didn't turn people away, we let him stay. The first odd thing was small. He announced he was black. He wasn't. When we blinked, he grinned, as if daring us to correct him. The second thing wasn't small at all. He pointed at a kid across the room and said, "Look, a monkey!" The silence at our table was instant and heavy. Ari pushed back from his chair. Jules told Mason to leave. He laughed like we were being dramatic, like cruelty was a costume we just didn't understand. We cut him off and went back to our own orbit. I figured that would be the end of it. Then Mason showed up in my JROTC class, khaki uniform, boots squeaking, a smirk that looked stapled on. He raised his hand more than anyone and delivered answers with the confidence of a YouTube expert. He told the instructor he wanted to enlist. For the blood and the action. A sentence that made a couple of kids snicker until they saw he wasn't joking. The jokes kept coming, except they didn't feel like jokes. During first aid training, he asked how much blood a person could lose before it got interesting. During an unannounced lockdown, we huddled in a dark classroom, listening to the echo of our own breathing as the PA crackled. When it ended, false alarm, relief spilled out of us in shaky laughter. Mason leaned back in his chair and said flatly, "Kinda sad. I didn't get to die today." He smiled at me when he said it, like it was a secret we shared. I tried to file him under edgy, the way adults do when they don't want to look too closely. But girls in our flight started swapping stories, Mason rating the exits in each classroom, Mason tracing his finger along the seam of his desk and saying he knew where to start. If he ever wanted to make the news, Mason humming while the rest of US took notes on conflict de-escalation. The more he talked, the quieter the room got. I told Sergeant Rivera, our flight leader. My voice sounded too high in my own ears. I didn't want to be the dramatic one, I wanted to be wrong. Rivera's face didn't change while I spoke, but when I was done he said carefully, "Write down everything you remember. Names. Dates. Exact words if you can." He asked if anyone else had heard similar comments. I knew they had. I also knew how fast stories warp once they leave your mouth. At lunch, I asked around. 3 girls had heard the "make the news" line. 2 more had heard variations. One said he'd pressed his face close to hers and whispered, "You'll see," like a promise. None of us laughed this time. We wrote statements the way you write confessions, fast, guilty, suddenly aware of every word. I told my mom that night. She's a guidance counselor at a different school, fluent in the language of threat assessment and duty to report. She didn't blink. "You did the right thing," she said, already composing an email in her head. I begged her not to make it bigger, not to turn me into the girl who overreacted. She hugged me, then hit send anyway. The next day, Rivera pulled Mason from formation. The room seemed to exhale. An administrator stepped in to sit with our class. We did drills that didn't require thought. After the bell, I saw Mason in the hallway, hands in his pockets, posture loose, eyes on me. He mouthed the word, "Snitch." I felt my face go hot. For a second, I almost apologized, an automatic reflex drilled into kids who tried to keep peace. Then I remembered the lockdown, the "sad I didn't get to die," the way he had savored the shape of the sentence. I kept walking. The school called my mom. They called a few parents. They called the school resource officer. They asked for our statements again, for clarity, for anything we'd left out. They did not tell us what they found or what they did next. There are parts of safety you don't get to see. That night, I filed a report with the police myself. My hand shook like I was the one on trial. The officer listened, asked precise questions, thanked me for coming in. I went home and sat on the floor of my room and cried in the quiet between the heater clicks. Rumors during the week splintered and multiplied. Some kids said Mason was suspended. Some said he was being evaluated. A few said he'd been misunderstood, that he was just darkly funny, that we'd ruined his life over words. Words like the ones he sharpened and pointed at us. words like a map he kept drawing in the air until someone finally paid attention. I started noticing my own habits. How I sat with my back to the wall in English, how I counted doorframes without meaning to, how I flinched when the intercom crackled. Fear is boring in the long run, it wears grooves in you. But it's also useful. It tells you where the lines should be. It tells you when a joke is not a joke. A week later, I saw Mason from a distance in the parking lot with an adult I didn't recognize. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. For the first time since he slid his chair up to our lunch table, the air around him felt contained. Not safe. Safety isn't a person leaving a room, but contained, like someone had finally shut a door and turned a lock. People love stories with catharsis, handcuffs, headlines, a lesson spelled out in thick black letters. I don't have that. What I have is quieter, a stack of documented statements, a mom who didn't minimize, a leader who took notes instead of taking offense, a week where nothing happened, which is sometimes the best ending you get. Here's what I wish someone had told me sooner. When a joke asks you to imagine your own harm, it's not a joke. When someone keeps drawing the outline of a terrible thing and waits for you to laugh, don't. Write it down. Tell someone. If they don't listen, tell someone else. Keep telling until the room changes. Because the scariest line Mason ever said wasn't about blood or dying or making the news. It was the one he didn't say, the silence after snitch, the certainty that he expected me to choose quiet. I didn't. And that's the part of the story I get to keep. The bag of hair. Freshman year of high school is supposed to be about new friends, awkward crushes, maybe learning how to survive algebra. That's all I expected. But then Javier arrived. He had just moved from Mexico, barely spoke English, and usually sat by himself. I'm Hispanic, so I spoke to him in Spanish. He lit up instantly, grateful someone could understand him. I felt sorry for him, lonely, isolated, so I made sure he didn't feel invisible. We partnered up in math. We talked during breaks. I told myself I was just being kind. At first, he was shy. But then little things started. He sat directly behind me in class. Sometimes I'd feel a light tug on my hair. Not painful, just enough to notice. I turned once, and he smiled faintly, said, "It's pretty. I like it." I brushed it off. He didn't seem dangerous. Weeks passed. The hair playing became routine. It creeped me out, but I didn't want to embarrass him, so I stayed quiet. He started drawing doodles in his notebook, hearts, initials, shapes I didn't quite understand. He'd catch me glancing and snap it shut. One afternoon he leaned forward and whispered, "Let's play a game. Write down everything you love. I'll do it too." It seemed harmless. I listed family, friends, God, music. He glanced over and frowned. Names. I want names. Reluctantly, I scribbled my parents, siblings, and a few close friends. He smiled, folded the paper carefully, and slid it into his pocket. That was the first moment I felt the weight of something I couldn't name. A few weeks later, Javier leaned closer than usual, eyes darting to make sure no one was watching. "I want to show you something. But you can't tell anyone. If you do, you'll pay." My heart skipped. I thought he was going to confess he liked me. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a Ziploc bag. At first I couldn't tell what was inside. Then he placed it on the desk. It was filled with hair. Dark strands, knotted, tangled, collected. My stomach flipped. "My hair," he said proudly. Before I could respond, he yanked up his sleeve. Jagged scars lined his forearm, some faded, some fresh. He pointed at the newest cut, still red, angry, and pressed the bag against it. His lips curled into a smirk. "You're mine now," he whispered. "I know who you love. I know what you love. If you don't do as I say, you'll pay. Every scar is a soul I own." The room spun. My throat closed. I bolted out of class, tears streaming, heart racing so hard I could barely breathe. Teachers looked confused as I stormed into the office and begged to see the counselor. I told her everything, his words, the scars, the bag. She listened, eyes wide, and called the principal. Within minutes, Javier was pulled from class. He didn't fight. He just smiled at me through the glass as they led him away. That same day, he was expelled. Later, staff found more notes in his backpack, lists of other students' names, like the one he made me write. My name was there too, circled over and over. The bag of hair. A notebook filled with drawings I couldn't look at for more than a second. I never saw him again. Not in the halls, not outside school, not anywhere. But his words stayed. You're mine now. I hated how they echoed when I tried to fall asleep, how they twisted into my dreams. For months afterward, every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. I stopped being the friendly, open girl who welcomed lonely kids at school. I built walls instead. Smiled less. Trusted less. Even now, years later, sometimes I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, convinced I'll see him standing there with that same smirk, holding that bag of hair like a trophy. I don't know if he meant it as a joke, some twisted way to scare me. But I know this: the moment someone tells you that you belong to them, the moment they use fear to chain you, it isn't a crush. It isn't love. It's possession. And that's the kind of thing that doesn't leave scars on the skin, it leaves them on the soul. Let me know what you think in the comments. This was Tell Me What Happened. I'll see you in the next story.